What's up, everybody? Happy Thursday to you on this week prior to the kickoff of the 2024 NFL season. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Believe in Cincy podcast network and CincyJungle.com. I'm Anthony. He's John. And we have a really, really fun show lined up. Not just because we're talking about the roster and everything, John, but we have a very special guest set to join us here in just a minute. How are you, bud?
Doing well, man. One of those guys who made the roster is a special guest. It's been a while since we had a guest, but the season's back, the show is back, and we're feeling good, man. I can't wait to bring him on.
We are feeling good, and he is joining us right after, I believe, practice here. Mr. Erick All, fourth-round pick of the Cincinnati Bengals, tight end, making some waves and some noise in a little bit of a short time coming back from injury, but you are really raising some eyebrows as we knew you would. Erick, how you doing, bud?
Well, really well. How about you?
Doing good. I appreciate you joining us. I know you're kind of rehydrating in the car, it looks like, and kind of chilling out, probably getting some air conditioning and everything, but we appreciate you making some time for us. We've been looking forward to this, arranging it, and we just appreciate you making time. And just to start off with, how have you been feeling? How have things been kind of going? I know kind of training camp could be a grind at times, but now the roster is pretty much set. Week one's right in front of you here. How are you feeling? How are you acclimating to the offense at this point?
I'm feeling really good. Just trying to get back to, feeling like my old self. I feel great, and it's just like little nuances that, I forgot that I could do like on different routes and things like that. But, I'm feeling confident and healthy, which is really big right now. And just excited to get out there and show coach what I can do.
So now that you've been a full participant in practice for about a month now, you were placed on the NFI like really early in camp, and then you returned and then you were immediately back in practice. Now a lot of people remember you made like a really impressive catch in like 7-on-7 when you took on some contact. Just like in terms of the ramp up process, now that all that's kind of in the past, like what were you expecting like when you first were starting to practice again? Like were you kind of just thrown in there where like you were telling the coaches, hey, like I'm ready to go, like, and it was just about a trust factor, stuff like that?
Yeah, really, as I was doing my rehab and everything, I was kind of like not really hesitant on coming back right away, just because of, I wasn't too confident in my knee, like really early, not really early on, but like probably halfway through rehab. So probably around like month 5. And then as as I got to the facility and was working with the trainers and doing all my workouts, that's when I started feeling really comfortable and started gaining a lot more confidence in my knee. So, when I got cleared, I felt great and told coach, I was good to do whatever they needed me to do. And I felt a little rusty getting back. I wasn't in shape and everything, but now that I'm in shape and I'm starting to get things or starting to really know what I'm doing out there, I feel a lot better and confident in my game. So,
talking with Bengals rookie tight end Erick All, who's been impressing very early on and hitting the ground running, coming back from that injury. And Erick, I don't know if you heard Zac Taylor heap some praise on you pretty recently. I think this is as of a day or two ago here via the Cincinnati media. And before we kind of get back, I want to talk about this before we kind of go back in time a little bit about your draft process and things like that. But Zac Taylor said, quote, he has gotten about you. Quote, he has gotten better each day. Erick has really, really stepped up his game from week to week and become a guy we think we can depend on as the game's near. He can carve out a role for himself and have some great opportunity here. So I guess kind of a little two-part question for you here. Number one, how does it, I'm sure it feels pretty dang good to hear that level of confidence from your head coach this early in the process. And what kind of, I mean, without spilling too much of the tea here, what kind of indication have the coaches given you in terms of, you know, your early role, because you are showing a lot to them early in the process?
Really, yeah, I mean, it's great to hear that, especially coming from Coach Taylor, but really, I'm just doing whatever they ask me to do, you know, that if they want me to come down and do a sift block and, you know, hit the DN, then I just do it to the best of my ability, and really just doing whatever they ask me to do. Yeah, like, and yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how much. I mean, and not only that, I mean, now that I actually know what I'm doing and I'm getting the playbook down as well, that's probably, you know, a confidence booster for the coaches as well, because, you know, it's tough. It's a tough offense to learn, and it really getting out there and knowing what I got to do, and the goal of each play is a big is a big confidence booster for myself as well. So yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting. I can't wait for, you know, game one.
I'm really glad you brought up the sift blocks, because you made quite a few of those in preseason, and they're just really fun to watch because you just take on the guys with perfect leverage and you displace guys very easily. Like, I know you come from obviously two really storied programs, specifically with developing tight ends, and like both at Michigan and Iowa. Like, at what point in your college career did you really start to become like an adept blocker and like earn the trust of coaches in that regard? Because obviously tight end is just such a complicated position. You're just tasked with so many roles, but like just in terms of blocking, like where did you really start to gain a lot of progress there that allowed you to hit the ground running as a rookie?
I'd say probably definitely towards the end of, you know, college, but I never really was an inline blocker. I was always the tight end that was pulling and sifting or doing counters and things like that. But, you know, I feel like I'm doing a lot more inline blocking here, which I love. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've always been like, since, you know, Pee Wee football, I've always been real physical, and, you know, my dad was my coach, and that was something that he was real big on, and, you know, it was looked at, you know, as a something that you have to play. Like me and my little brother, my cousins, all of us, you know, grew up just hitting. We'll be doing drills in the backyard or at a park, and we'll all the family, the kids, we're all around the same age. We'll bring our pads and we'll just do hitting drills, and so that's always been, you know, just part of my game. So coming here and doing that, you know, I just felt like, you know, it's just me having fun and playing the game, just doing what I do, and the coaches love it. And not only that, Coach Casey was was a crazy good blocker doing sifts and fullbacks, doing inline, not inline, but inserts and things like that. So works out perfect.
Yeah, Casey was a versatile player when he played in the pros. Talking with Bengals rookie tight end Erick All joining the program. Stoked to have him join us. I know he's resting up a little bit right after practice, and we appreciate you carving out some time for us, Erick. You know, I think you've been asked this quite a bit. We're going way back. I was going to kind of talk a little bit about college, but you kind of brought up childhood, et cetera. And some folks know, some folks don't know. When you were an infant, a really scary story where you had kind of a close call with not making it. I think you were around 1 year old, if I'm not mistaken. There was a fire in your home, that sort of thing. And I know there was a call ESPN College Game Day kind of special on that. I watched that, and I know I got a little emotional watching that. But I mean, how much do you now that you are in the pros on a final roster? You are active, coming from your injury. How often do you look back on that situation and reflect like, wow, how far I've come? And I don't know, just gratitude and all of that I guess comes with a situation like that.
I feel very blessed and, very honored to, being able to, be alive, let alone, playing the game, that I dreamed to make it to the highest level. And not only that, like just being here and, and just taking everything in is just definitely, definitely wild. I think about it a lot. And, if it wasn't for, Tom Broyles and Sean Phoenix and, which are the firefighters and EMT that saved my life. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here. And it's crazy just to think about and I mean I was 5 months old and I don't really remember any of it, but
Right.
I just thank them and try to do my best to make sure I do everything to the best of my ability and do it 100% and I got a second chance at life. Not that doesn't really happen to everybody. So yeah, just take advantage
You got a
of
lot
it.
of people. Yeah, you got a lot of people pulling for you, man.
Yep, thank you.
So you grew up in Fairfield, Ohio. We got a little bit in common. I grew up in Westchester, not too far away from that. For people who aren't familiar with the Cincinnati area, this is going to be a question that they can be enlightened with a little bit. Do you remember the first time you went to Jungle Gyms, and what is your favorite part of the store?
Uh, um, Geez, I don't remember the very first time. I was real young, but it's cool. It's cool. It's definitely different. I think we went there one time to like, there was like this candy with like a cricket in the middle of it or something like
Yep.
that. We would go there and there's a whole lot of weird stuff going on in that store, but yeah, we definitely. I don't remember the very first time. We didn't go there a lot, but yeah, it's definitely a pretty cool spot.
No,
Well,
it's not
I
like a place where you go regularly. Like we would go
Yeah,
like every now and then is like, oh, we want to get something here that we
I didn't
don't get
know
at
it.
like a Kroger or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I feel like people go there very often though because you go in there, you start seeing the same people. So,
yeah, I'm in SoCal, man, so I don't know what the hell you guys are talking about. So
no, it's like
I'll
this.
just
It's like this world market, and they have like pretty much everything in there from anything. They got like,
crazy stuff.
yeah, you can eat like it's exotic. It's real. It's weird. Yeah, for
Well,
sure.
Eric, the Bengals obviously showed a lot of interest in you in the pre-draft process. So we were, I think a lot of mock drafts had you landing with the Bengals. I'm sure you were obviously kind of surprised maybe that the team drafted you, but maybe not so much because of the interest level there. I got kind of another two-parter for you. Number one, how surprised were you when the Bengals called you up and let you know that they were going to draft you? And number two, what was one of the way, not necessarily from the Bengals, you don't even have to say from who, but we always like to ask, especially, Bengals rookies that are on our show and coming into their first season, what was kind of one of the weirdest questions, if you can relay it, that you received through the pre-draft process from a team?
Mm. Definitely, was shook when I got the call from Coach Taylor, and definitely, I just couldn't wait to, because at the time I wasn't really doing rehab because I was home and you couldn't be you didn't know where you were going, but you just can't, like, especially me, like I just couldn't wait to finally get back on the rehab and getting back to playing because like I knew I felt great and I knew I could have a very good chance of playing this season, but for it to be home and not have to worry about moving and being with my family and friends and everyone I grew up with was very mind blowing and very blessed. It's just like, what are the odds?
Yeah.
But as far as like the weirdest question, geez, I can't even. No one really asked. I mean, when I was doing the mock draft, the like doing the mock draft questions that that they'll ask you to like prep you for the questions that the coaches will ask you. Like they
Uh-huh.
asked me to see my Wi-Fi history, and I just look. I didn't really know what to do, but I said something like if you can see mine, if I can see yours, or something like that.
That's
But
awesome.
That's the only one I can think of. I don't think. But once I got to the combine, like coaches weren't asking any weird questions. They were more
Okay.
worried about like my knee and like they were more worried about like like what I would do versus this look, like blocking. They were more worried about stuff like that, like me being
Yeah.
a blocker and not just pass. Because in college, I was mainly a pass catching tight end, but
Hmm.
stuff like that they would ask me. So
Yeah.
That's probably a good thing if all the questions are just surrounding football. If you can't really remember like
Yeah.
a crazy one, we've heard some stories about all that.
yeah,
But in regards to just like the knee and the back, just dealing with that for like 2 years and just having to constantly answer about that with all that kind of in the rearview mirror, like is there just a sense of like clear headedness now? Like you go forward and not have to worry about that, or just what was it like just going through that and just be constantly reminded that, oh yeah, this is just on my history now.
yeah. I mean, it was kind of like it got to the point where I was just saying the same exact thing over and over again, but it was just like I get it, but I feel like they were less worried about the back because I came back and I was playing and I had played, well, not a full season, but part of a season, and I really showed that my back was no longer an issue. But some teams were more worried about my back and didn't really care for my ACL, which was kind of like made me feel good because if they seen my MRIs and checked out my leg and made sure everything was good, and for them to be more worried about my back, it was kind of like a breath of fresh air. But it was definitely annoying, and I was ready to get back healthy because I knew I was going to be fine. I knew I was going to come back, and I knew I was going to be able to play during the season. So
Going to spend a couple more minutes here with Bengals rookie tight end Erick All. Really, really excited to have him join the program. Excited for what's ahead for him. Have you, whether it is with Joe Burrow or just kind of the other guys on the offense or just the team in general, has there been a lot of chatter, and especially with you being a rookie, about, hey, this is what it's like from the veterans. This is what it's like playing in this division. I mean, I think pretty much universally known that this is the toughest in terms of competition, but also one of, if not the most physical divisions in all of the NFL. So, I mean, have there been conversations about, hey, man, be be ready for those divisional games and what's coming there, or just kind of, hey, it goes without saying, and let's get to work.
um, kind of both. I mean, when we first got here, the rookie meetings, Coach Taylor really made it clear that, man, we're all these divisional games, like, come out here and really put your best foot down because they all count and we got to win it. And I mean, that's what anything. I mean, every game you play, I mean, you're gonna try to win and do your very best. But he brought it up several times, like how serious it is and how dominant this division is. But the players, they just want us to, like the leaders and the vets, they want to see you at your best. Like Drew and Tanner and Mike, like they helped me out a lot, and they try to make sure that not just me but all the rookies in the tight end room, they just make sure that we know what we're doing. Any questions we ask, they help us out and fix us on little things, but they just want us to be at our best, like as a team, for those games and the season. So yeah.
In regards to Mike and the other vets in that room, I mean, 5 tight ends is a lot for an NFL roster and an initial NFL roster, but all 5 of you guys, like, it's such a talented and maybe more so a diverse group. There's like so many skill sets. Gasecki is like a big slot. Drew Sample's one of the better blocking tight ends in the league, and you can do a little bit of everything. Just like, what are those meetings like with just all those different types of skill sets coming together? Like, how's it kind of been with the 5 of you kind of all meshing together?
It's kind of cool because it's not like college. It's different. Like the vets are, they've been here for years, and Mike's been playing in the league for years, and so like it's like real nonchalant, and they're very confident in their game, and they know a whole lot about the game. So, it's real nonchalant. And, Coach Casey, he's quizzing us on making sure that we know what we're doing, because he's darn near a perfectionist when it comes to or making sure that we know that we're exactly what we're doing, and it has to be perfect. So he's like quizzes us on plays, and um, he's coaching technique and showing us how other tight ends in the league mess these plays up, and these different type of blocks and these different type of routes and stuff like that. So it's nonchalant, but we get work done, and coach tries to show us how to get our job done and do it the right way and in the best way possible. So
Well, Eric, we're gonna get you on out of here in just a minute. We appreciate the time. We said about 10, and we've gone almost double that. And I apologize, but we
not
just
a
have enjoyed the
problem.
chat, man. We've enjoyed the chat, man. And one of the things we like to do when we bring on players on the show, especially ones who are new to the team, is give them a little bit of, hey, tell us either something about you that fans don't know that they might be interested in, whether it's a hobby or just tell us let us get to know you a little bit with a couple little tidbits of info that may not, readily be out there.
Yeah. Well, I like to play golf.
Oh,
Yes.
I just
oh,
shot the best score since I've started playing. I started playing like a couple years ago, and I shot at 88 like last week, which I'm pumped about. But
Damn.
and then I
yeah,
play a
that's
lot of
solid.
chess. Me and some of the guys play on the team.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I have a son, Houston. He's about to be 2, and here in the or here soon, September 3rd.
Oh,
So
awesome.
yeah, and yeah, I think that's pretty much it. But
Awesome. Well, happy early birthday to Houston there. That's awesome, man. And that we do want to give one more because it's a super chat with a donation there. Hey, Eric, it's from Mr. Whisper, and he's always generous to it. Hey, Eric, welcome to Cincy. I had a tidbit type of question. I'm curious if there's a particular route you like to run over others.
mm, um, I'd say not. I mean, not really. I really like running the choice route where you can based on how the guy's playing, you can break in, break out. You could
Yeah.
sit down. You could pretty much do whatever you need to do. But you run it at like 5 yards and get open.
Nice. Nice. Thank you, Mr. Whisper, for that. And we wanted to at least give him the chance to answer a question there. But Eric, we appreciate the time, man. I know we went way longer than we said, but thanks for being so generous with your time. I'm sure you're ready to to get going from practice and everything. We wish you the best, man. We know you've got a bright future ahead. We were stoked when the Bengals drafted you, and we know good things are ahead. And hopefully we can do this again sometime soon. We'd love to have you back on.
Yes, sir. No problem. No problem at all.
All right. Take care. Have a great season, man.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you, Eric.
right.
All right, bye.
That is Erick All joining the program. That was a lot of fun. We've been working on, hopefully, we've been working on getting him, and I know it's just hard with preseason and practices and training camp and all that kind of stuff. Little bit of a lighter load there, but thank you to his group who has arranged that for us. That was awesome. And again, we told him 10 minutes and we went like 20. So I feel bad about that. We always do that. We're like, hey, and then we get going and we really like, but heck of a nice guy. I think the sky's the limit for him, John, as we know. And I think, I don't know, man. I think that position group has really become a strong point on this team now after being a very weak one the past couple of seasons, right? And like I like the question that you pointed out and Eric kind of expanded on it, man. It's like you got guys that just do that. It's not a carbon copy of each of the same guy, right? I mean, they just do different things. And this is kind of where the Bengals offense, I think, is diversifying itself, where it's like, how are you going to guard this? How are you going to guard this? How are you going to guard this guy? That sort of thing.
It's crazy how much a year can change, and drafting two very talented guys in Erick All and Tanner McLaughlin, bringing in, when he's had a good quarterback, a really solid receiving option in Mike Gesicki, and the two solid tight ends that they had last year. So it was, like you said, complete makeover of the group. And it's crazy, how much things can change in just a year. Even if you just started playing golf a couple years ago and you break 90, I can't wait to tell that story to my friend who still has trouble breaking 90, even though he's got really expensive clubs after playing for 5 years. Athletes are just different, man. You can't compare them. They're just so much naturally gifted at everything else that we like to do.
Dude, I total non sequitur here, but I think it was the Washington Nationals, if I'm not mistaken. There was a group of players during BP before the game started. I guess there's a group of them that were on a fantasy football team together, and they were doing a closest to the pin deal on the field, on the actual stadium field. I don't know if you saw that clip or not, where they're all hitting irons, and every single one, like there's not one, chunked shot at all. Right. They're all just pure clean shots, and I'm just like, oh man, I mean, I'm okay, but I'm like, man, just going up there and just raking one, and they all seemed like the way they were looking at it, they didn't show where they were landing, but nobody made a facial expression saying, "Wow, man, that was a terrible shot." They all look pretty pure. So you are right, professional athletes, they are just different breeds, and that dude is a different breed. And the Bengals were banking on him, being a big contributor when healthy. We were wondering if he was going to be a pup list guy, going into this whole thing, just because of the injuries and, hey, take it slow. And it's a deep group, etc. And dude got activated early, and he's been balling out. He's been balling out. And I think these are the types of players, as you get into the division and as you go up against your, Kansas Cities and Buffaloes, and these are the types of other weapons outside of Jamar Chase, outside of T. Higgins, that really, really pay dividends, especially late in the season.
A lot of the yards after catch will be very welcomed as well. It is something that they kind of lost last year when a certain current Kansas City Chiefs running back left for the AFC West. Just having that kind of weapon back into the mix, along with others, is going to help. And, like Gesicki will go down the field, and so will Tanner whenever he sees the field. But I think there is a clear indication that there's going to be some type of a niche role for Erick All kind of early on. I would imagine he's going to be active in that deep group of tight ends, both as a blocker and as like a choice route type of receiver, if that's where he's finding his comfort zone. But I've said it on this program before, and I'll say it again. He's got the potential to be the most all-around tight end that this team has had in quite some time. His college profile indicated it. His skill set indicates it. And so far, the early returns are, yeah, he can do a little bit of everything. And I'm really excited to see how he develops.
Yeah. And I wanted to kind of ask him, but you kind of touched on it. He kind of touched on it. Just, man, what's in the water in Iowa for tight ends? I mean, it's a factory, and he's the latest, and he hasn't, there've been guys picked later than him that have been star players, in the league. There's guys that have been picked higher than him that have done the same. And, there is a middle rounds, you can find yourself a good tight end. We've seen it, but, sometimes even Hall of Fame tight ends, like a Jimmy Graham type of guy. So not placing that expectation on this young man here already, but Zach Taylor, you heard the compliments from him. A lot of good things seen in limited snaps in the preseason. And I think the sky's the limit for the kid. I really do.
Pretty much. And I think, and we can talk about this more as we go over the roster, but when they drafted both him and McLaughlin, you're thinking this is just a lot. Like there's going to be some type of a tough cut to be made. And it turns out they can't cut any of them. Obviously, with All being healthy enough, like you have to keep him on the team. He played well in the preseason whenever he had the chance. McLaughlin hardly played, but whenever he did get the ball, like he made good things happen. So it's just like it's good management by the coaching staff to just keep your best players. And it's a position that goes through a lot of attrition throughout the season because, again, it's such a tough position to play. Your body's on the line every single snap, whether it be blocking or running into traffic. It's a position that needs depth, and especially now as the offense starts to veer into more 12 personnel and using multiple of them on this field at the same time, it's going to be a position that's more relied on than in years past. And having a guy like that, who, again, I think is like the perfect spot in the draft to draft one and develop one who has that high end athleticism, has that production. So yeah, looking like a pretty good pick.
I wonder how much higher he would have gone had he had the clean bill of health.
Day 2, 100%.
Yeah. I find that pretty easy to believe. But Speaking of Believe, this is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast on the Believe Network and the Believe in Cincy channel. And we're trying to get you cool content like that, interviews, those types of interviews with guys like Erick All. And I know Bengal Jim and friends also on the channel had Elizabeth Blackburn recently on their show, getting some great stuff from Matt and Willie, who know ball. In case you hadn't heard, they know ball. And of course, the gentleman from 3 and Out. We're looking to maybe do a collab with some folks here, maybe as the season gets close there, and then some other guests to help preview opponents and that sort of stuff. Listener questions live. We're going to keep doing a lot of different stuff, but we've got a lot of live viewers through all kinds of different platforms. We appreciate that, whether that's on Twitter, whether that's on Cincy Jungle's Facebook page, or our YouTube channel. And speaking of our YouTube channel, if you like the video side of things, you can subscribe underneath John there. By that Cincy Jungle icon, there is an Orange and Black Insider Show icon. Click that. Click the subscribe button. Click the bell to be notified to be notified when we go live, when new content is available. And of course, give us a thumbs up if you like what we're doing. We appreciate that. And you got to go resubscribe to the Believe in Cincy podcast channel through your favorite audio streamer. Leave us a review. Go resubscribe. I know it's a little bit of a pain to go find it, but BLEAV in Cincy, CINCY. And that's where you're going to get the slate of shows that I mentioned before. Really, really cool. Just thanks to Erick All and his group again for allowing us the time. And again, we doubled up on what we asked him, but hey, we had him here. He was chilling out in the car, hopefully with some AC on, and I don't know, hanging out, but really, really cool. Thanks to him. Before we get to the roster, John, let's just kind of talk about this again. This seems to be a, days of our lives type of thing here. And, one thing is said one day, one thing happens the next day that's different than the thing that's said the previous day. Ja'Marr Chase has been he has not practiced the last 2 days. He's been at practice, but he has not practiced. Prior to the last 2 days, Zach Taylor said, he kind of expects him to play or to keep, to practice and play and all of that. He had practiced prior to that and then has sat out. So now it's kind of a day-to-day thing. And this is all, of course, centering around the contract situation that the Bengals and he are trying to work out.
I think it was Sunday afternoon when the Bengals tweeted out a picture of him practicing, right? And then Monday he practiced again. And then Tuesday, after final cuts, Zach Taylor went on to a press conference, was asked about Ja'Marr Chase and whether or not he expects him to practice for the remainder of the week and then play week 1. And to both those questions, he answered yes. And then the next day, Ja'Marr Chase makes it well known that he showed up late to practice and decided not to practice, and the holdout resumed. And I can only assume that, and not just me, all of us, because none of this is more than just speculation by design. It's just about, hey, I want to be ready for the season. I'm still putting in work, speaking from Jamar's perspective, and I will show up for some of these practices so long as we have an agreement that there's going to be an extension done. And I don't know if he took exception to what Zach said. And by the way, Zach is the only one who's been saying anything about this. The organization has been silent. Right. Chase himself has been silent. They're in these negotiations. Typically, one side doesn't speak unless the other does. So Zach is just caught in the middle of this. And I don't know if he spoke out of turn. He said he just caught his foot in his mouth, I guess, was his direct quote for saying about Wednesday when he didn't practice. And I think it was just, hey, I'll continue doing this until we get a deal done. And we could talk about what he wants out of the contract, whatever, or the fact that maybe the Bengals don't really want to give it to him yet. There's a precedent about non-quarterbacks drafted in the first round not getting an extension until after year 4 for the Bengals. That was the case with AJ Green. That was the case with Drake Kirkpatrick. But obviously, Ja'Marr Chase is a different breed, and the contract that he's going to get is going to be very similar in terms of structure-wise to Joe Burrow, and that's another thing that we have to consider. I don't think it's necessarily the money. I think it really is just about that precedent of the timing aspect. But as messy as this now looks, because you have a disconnect between the coach and the player, and it's a week until game practice week and he's still not practicing out there, I think this is just him exercising every ounce of leverage that he has left. And he's the type of player that can do so because he's the second most important player on the team, and his availability can determine whether or not the Bengals can actually win the Super Bowl. That's his leverage here. Even if the Bengals can rescind money that he's owed or he's already been paid for via roster bonus and the signing bonus, they can take that back. They're well within their rights to penalize them in that sense. But like, they're running up against the clock here. And I really think that if there's any player aside from Joe Burrow who can do this, it's probably Jamar Chase. And people may not like that. They may not like that a player is not completely bought in or not, just being a good employee or everything like that. But like, holdouts and hold-ins, they can result in contracts. It just happened with CeeDee Lamb, who wasn't even holding in, by the way. He was holding straight out. He wasn't even attending the team meetings and everything like that. Like, he was just doing everything in his power to get a deal. And he got a deal done. So this is Chase's way of trying to get that to happen. And I don't fault him for trying to get paid as soon as possible, but it might just be an area where the Bengals don't want to bend.
And it could be that their plan all along was to get this done next offseason. But
right.
As we know, that if you do that, you play that risk reward game, right? If you do that, and so does Chase, right? I mean, kind of not necessarily a contract year, but kind of, right? In a way, if he does not sign a long-term deal, it's kind of one of those things where you go, well, I got to go out there and perform and put up the numbers and get the wins, et cetera, et cetera. But if you don't, there's the leverage that's lost, or a year from now too. Let's just say he's the same Jamar Chase that we've come to know and love in terms of his statistical output and his impact on the team. Then all of a sudden you're looking next off season, if that was kind of the aim or the plan, or if that has to become the aim or the plan because it doesn't get done now. As the Bengals, you're now paying likely more if he has the season that we expect him to have coming up here. So you're right. It is a leverage game. He's kind of playing all the cards that he has, but he's also doing it in a way that is much different than other holdouts we have seen for a long time with the Bengals. I'm going back in time, but we've seen some guys not have the best attitude or approach when it came time for an extension. And then the money talked, and then they got back in line, so to speak. But this is, like you said, he's showing up. He's there. I think when you hear guys like Mike Hilton being asked about it from reporters, he kind of nicely squashes it, saying, hey, let him do his own thing. And that is not just protecting a younger player on the roster and saying, hey, he's worth his due, player protecting player, teammate protecting teammate. That's also Hilton being a leader, in my estimation, in trying to limit any kind of potential distraction that may or may not cause on this team. And they've been through it a little bit with the Jesse Bates thing.
Yeah. And of course, Bates was different because that was a franchise
Right.
tag, and he couldn't have signed an extension during training camp. Even if he wanted to, that deadline had passed. So Bates didn't really have a choice but to report and sign, to lead up to the season. This is obviously different. Chase can show up the next day, and then he'll be under contract for 2 more years, and he'll have to play that out or whatever the case may be. But again, like, even if they do wait next year and the cap inflation whole thing happens, there may not be another receiver deal that comes close to Justin Jefferson by then. Like, I'm sure T. Higgins will get a lot, but he's not going to necessarily impact Chase's market. But even if the cap inflation does happen and Chase does get more this time next year than he would this year, I really don't think the Bengals really care that much. Like, I feel like that price, it is what it is, and you just pay it if you're the Bengals, because even if they have the leverage in the sense of, we have roster control over you, we can take away your money if you don't show up for week 1, like, that leverage is there. But at the end of the day, Chase knows that he's going to get paid by the Bengals. If the Bengals let him go along with T. Higgins, they look like absolute fools, and that's not something that they can recuperate from. So he knows that he's going to eventually come out on top of this. These things do take a while because the team itself, the Bengals, are not competing with other teams for Chase's services. So both sides are dug in for exactly what they want, and that's why it typically takes the longest time. Whereas in open free agency, teams are competing against other teams. It's a bidding war. The price always goes up. Whereas in these situations, the price always ends up being about what we expect, and just both sides want to come out as the winners, which is why it takes a long time. It's why the negotiations can be very intense. So I think with this, it's obviously Mike Hilton is going to be in his corner because, again, he's Jamar Chase, and like he's just that important. He just means that much to the team. And even if he isn't practicing consistently, even if he's making a statement without even saying a word. Like, he just knows who he is. He knows that he's the type of player that can do this and get away with it. And that's just what it is.
Well, two things, and we kind of talked about this a little bit last week. Two things. Number one, this is a lot of money for the Bengals, who just, when you're talking about valuation of the team comparative to others, this is a big deal, and it's a big deal in conjunction with the Joe Burrow deal that they just did last year, right? So it just, this the reality is it may take the Bengals a little longer to spring for this sort of thing, especially with multiple contracts on the roster like that. But number two, and granted, we're going back a little bit. I mean, but the Bengals, we've talked about this a lot. The Bengals have paid their star wideouts. And I know T. Higgins is a bit of an exception, and he is a bit of an exception because they have another star wideout on the team that they're trying to pay. So, I think while I don't know that, I'm not really optimistic that both deals with T and Jamar Chase will get done. I am optimistic that the Bengals, know the value of the position. They draft this position high. They pay it well. It's just a matter of let's make this work. And if it can't get done right now, we'll have to look to next offseason and get more creative as that timeline comes nearer.
It's going to come down to, and this is like the last thought I have on this, because I really do think timing is just the whole crux of this issue. And this is a team that very rarely breaks precedent, not just from a financial sense, but just how they make decisions. And if it comes down to standard operating procedure is to pay first round picks after year 3, if that's just the standard around the league, which is starting to slowly become that. And again, entering this offseason, that wasn't the case. Nick Bosa and Justin Jefferson stood out as players who had to wait until right before year 5 when they got paid. Nick Bosa held out the entirety of training camp entering year 5, and he eventually got a market resetting deal. Like, that's just how it was. And then this year it became different with Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, Christian Darrisaw, Penei Sewell, a lot of guys from Chase's draft class. And he's thinking to himself, this is just how things are now. And I don't think the Bengals are quite on board with that yet. But they just may not have a choice here because this is Jamar Chase, and you just have to make an exception to that. So if it comes down to this is just the new standard of the NFL, I don't know how quickly the Bengals are going to adapt to this, or maybe if they will adapt to this at all, maybe they just make Jamar Chase the true exception to this rule. But like that's something that I think is worth monitoring in future years. And that's a good problem to have, obviously, if your first round picks are worth getting paid that much that soon. But like that's I think the biggest crux of this whole thing, and it's a matter of whether or not Chase ends up being the exception.
Yeah, and I wanted to get to this comment from Martin because, hey, UK fan from the UK tuning in live and checking us out and providing feedback. Do you guys think this is disruptive and not part of the team ethic? UK Bengal here in the fan base wouldn't accept a player doing this in a UK sport like soccer. The team is everything here. How far can Chase push this without risking negative fan response? I don't know if negative fan response is the question. Negative fan response directed to Chase, or I'm seeing more negative fan response directed towards the organization than to Chase. At least that's kind of my sense on it a little bit. Maybe it's split. I don't know. But I seem to see the old Bengals are cheap narrative, coming out of the woodwork again when talking about this. I don't think it's. I think that's why Mike Hilton kind of squashed that question. I think it was today, saying, hey, let's, let him do his business. I think the players understand. And the fact is, John, I don't think it's as big of a disruption that it may have been in past Bengals teams. And I'm talking most likely before pre-Zach Taylor, because of the type of character of players that they've continued to bring in free agency in the draft over and over again. So I don't think it's that big of a distraction, but people, there he is, and then they get asked about it and that sort of thing. So I don't think it's as big of a distraction as people may think it is, but it's there.
Worried about negative fan reaction is just funny to me because no player is safe from scrutiny from entitled fans. It's the same cycle every time. It's, I don't know if the Bengals should draft Jamar Chase over Penei Sewell. Bengals draft Jamar Chase. This guy's going to be the next best receiver. He has a phenomenal rookie year. This guy's a Pro Bowler. He should be an All-Pro. And he gets praised at this at this acclaim in this level. Now he wants to get paid, and now the tables have turned. Like, you want to get paid? What the hell is wrong with you? Show up to practice, man. And then he gets paid, and then everything's just water under the bridge, and he's scoring touchdowns again, and all the fan support is back. It's just if it happens to Jamar Chase, it can happen to anybody, and it's never going to stop because this is just human nature. So no, I don't think risking negative fan reaction or anything like that's even remotely a concern.
Yeah. Well, let's close up with the roster. The Bengals, they kind of made their. I'm starting to call it like their final-ish roster when they do it, because it's like, well, is it final? I don't know if that's final. Initially I didn't think there were too many surprises, and then they kind of started doing a little bit of a shell game. I actually kind of started to suspect that Myles Murphy was going to go on short-term IR. Just to kind of, maximize the roster space there. And then I thought they would probably go after a defensive lineman, maybe two, with some things there, but a couple of other little surprises as well. John, Travion Williams was cut. Then he was brought back. The Bengals only temporarily had two running backs on the active roster, which was like, whoa, that's a little weird. And then, they brought him back, and that was kind of predictable. Travion himself tweeted out, hey, this is just kind of roster gymnastics. It'll work out. Bengals bring in, somebody, and then they IR McKinley Jackson so that is a bit disturbing. So kind of your overarching impressions of the roster, moves made, moves not made as week 1 years.
I think the biggest surprise, there weren't many big surprises. I don't even know if this is a big surprise in itself. I feel like the only kind of surprise was keeping 6 defensive tackles and cutting Jalen Davis. I could have seen that going either way. Davis being a vested veteran, 50 games of experience, special team savant, all that jazz, right? But it makes sense to bring him back on the practice squad. Again, didn't have to go through waivers, pretty much a handshake deal to just come back. And they kept 6 defensive tackles because I think they were at least seriously considering IRing McKinley Jackson at the deadline. But the new rule this year states that you can only do that with 2 players, which would be put them on IR at the cut line date and designate them to return. Old rules stated that you had to have the guys on the active roster and then place them on IR, which required roster gymnastics. So they did that with Myles Murphy and Brad Robbins. Doing that with Brad Robbins, just to me, means that the punter competition isn't over, and they're going to give him a chance to beat out Rico if Rico hasn't completely solidified himself after a month.
Right.
But obviously with Murphy suffering that knee injury so close to the regular season, makes sense to give him as much time as possible. And I think the fact that, so they claimed KJ Henry to essentially replace Myles Murphy on the team. And in order to make room for him, they didn't just place McKinley Jackson on IR. They released Travion Williams to make room for him. And then to bring back Travion Williams, they put McKinley Jackson on IR. And you're thinking to yourself, they could have just saved a step by just placing McKinley Jackson on IR after the cut down date, and that would just be a 1-to-1 thing. So I feel like they weren't 100% sure if they wanted to put Jackson on IR, and then after maybe thinking about it for a day, that was their decision. Okay, like we're going to release Williams because again he can come back immediately, and then they just went ahead and did that decision with Jackson. So both those guys on the defensive line, they've they missed some time now, and now they're going to have a full month of recovery. And the defensive line at this point is what we expected in terms of numbers wise: 5 edges, 5 defensive tackles. Jay Tufele is going to be really the only true nose tackle of the group, and at least compared to Jackson, he's a veteran. He has experience in the scheme. So is there a drop off in talent? Probably a little bit, but again, like that position was always going to have some question marks, and they're going to have to manage around it. But I really do think, though, Anthony, like the edge group is in a good spot. Like obviously both starters are healthy. Joseph Asai looks really good. Cedric Johnson had a really good preseason, and so did KJ Henry, who was Myles Murphy's teammate, bookend at Clemson. He recorded, I think, like 8 pressures in the final 2 preseason games for Washington. He had a good end of the regular season last year as a rookie. So even though Myles Murphy being out is kind of puts a damper on things, I think the group as a whole is in a decent spot.
I'm a little disheartened because it feels like the Bengals had 2 young good edges and kind of starting to ascend into their what was and what is a promising second year, and you kind of get it derailed a little bit. I'm talking about Joseph Asai and Myles Murphy because of injuries and stuff like that, and you go, man, it just bad timing. KJ Henry's interesting. KJ Henry didn't have a ton of eye-popping stats in college, but there are things that, kind of point out, stick out to you, particularly as a senior, where you go, well, as a rotational guy here, maybe there's something that, he can do to help the team. 51 total tackles, 9 total tackles for loss, never eclipsed more than 4.5 sacks per season. He had, 2 in 2019, 3.5 in 2020, 4.5 in 21, and 3.5 last year. The one stat that sticks out to me, though, John, 11 total passes defended from the defensive line and 6 in his final year. And that's something where, hey, that's an interesting stat, right? I mean, that's kind of the old Michael Johnson thing, right? Maybe you're not getting to the quarterback, but that's an effective play. That's a drive killing type of play if you just knock a pass down, particularly if it's second and long, third and long, that sort of thing. So, I think there's some stuff there as on a rotational basis where you go, okay, this makes sense. I am concerned about the interior of the defensive line, but I am a lot more confident in the tight end group, and not just because Erick All was on our show, but we talked about it, a lot more confident in that group. I like Jalen Davis, but I think the team really likes Dijon Anthony and just, the makeup of the secondary at this point in time. And they think, you look at that, the corners and the safeties, they've got a lot of athleticism and a lot of speed at those positions. And so I think that can maybe mask some of the stuff potentially that's going on up front. It's going to take big leaps from Dax, DJ Turner this year, that sort of thing. And obviously CTB staying healthy, but I'm encouraged there. As you look at this roster, John, I've seen some people say, oh, there's some really weak areas. There's this, that, and the other thing. Is this right now, as it's currently comprised, and I know there are guys that are injured, is this, in your estimation, the most talented roster that Zach has had, or should we look still back at, 22, maybe 21? I know 21, we thought they arrived a little early there, but is this right now, as it's currently comprised, their most talented roster in your estimation that they've had?
Such an interesting question, because I feel like the defense back in 21 and 22 was more well-built and had more experience to win some big games, and that's yet to be seen if that's the case, even if Von Bell's back, right? Obviously, it's a big boost, but it's a lot of talent that has yet to kind of prove itself in the secondary and maybe some spots along the defensive line. But like those 21 and 22 teams, as talented as they were, they had like a fatal flaw that ended up crippling them when it mattered the most. And that doesn't exist now along the offensive line. There's a comfort level that group can keep Joe Burrow upright for the vast majority of the season. And whenever that's the case and he's healthy, they're always in a good spot to do some damage in the AFC. So I think without that like crippling weakness, even if there is one, it's like nose tackle. And I don't know how much that position actually plays in whatever scheme that they run now. Like there's no like glaring weaknesses now outside of like some unproven guys where you're thinking like this is going to hold them back from winning the Super Bowl. Where in 2021, no one thought of the Super Bowl because of just how terrible that offensive line was, and the fact that they were barely even in the playoff conversation up until like the later parts of December. So in terms of overall talent level, there's a lot to be excited about, and it's more evenly distributed throughout the roster because some of the strengths are still the strengths that have always been with this team, but there isn't that truly like glaring weakness at like a really important spot or position group like there was in years past, I would say.
Yeah. Part of me says, yes, this is, arguably the most talented team that Zach has put together. There are some places where I go, I'm a little uneasy there, but overall, I mean, you mentioned even the interior defensive line and Jay Tufele being the only nose tackle we have seen, even though it's in short bursts. Sometimes we have seen him as a fill-in guy make some plays, and we have seen him be effective here and there. But I think this is going to be a different, this team's going to operate differently. And we knew that going into it, but all of the weapons in the tight end group, the way that they are going to disperse the football in the running back group, I think the offense is just going to be different and maybe not so dependent heavy on, 3 or 4 players. It's going to be a lot of even distribution of the ball, I think, or more distribution of the ball across the roster because of the talent at wide receiver, the trust there. And Joe can kind of be a little bit of a point guard, right? And just kind of distribute and make plays. But I think to your point, there's some risk because they are relying in certain spots on athleticism and just a transition on certain parts of both sides of the football on this roster. But if it pays off, I think you're looking at a real and they stay healthy, of course. I think you're looking at a really strong season ahead for the Bengals.
The one thing we haven't covered is the finalization of the practice squad. So they put together the initial group of 12 right after roster cuts, and all 12 of those guys were a part of final cuts for the Bengals. And then they added 4 guys from other teams. They added Isaiah Thomas, the edge out of Cleveland Browns. They added Justin Rogers, the nose tackle from the Dallas Cowboys. They added Kendall Milton, the running back from the Philadelphia Eagles. And then they added a guard from the Baltimore Ravens. I forget his name off the top of my head. And it is Tashawn Manning, who played at Kentucky in college. And I think it's interesting that all 4 of these guys had some type of connection with the Bengals. 2 of them did play in the AFC North. Isaiah Thomas has 1 career sacked, and it's against Joe Burrow back in 2022. So getting a defensive lineman from the Cleveland Browns, even if he is not going to play, there's some talent there if he was someone they had to let go. Justin Rogers is one of like the 5,000 nose tackles that they met with at the combine and during the draft this year. He was a guy from Auburn, Dallas, and I know there's some Dallas fans that were a little upset that he wasn't able to come back. Kendall Milton is actually the nephew of Kevin Hardy, who played linebacker for the Bengals like 20 years ago. So that was like one of the handful of guys in this year's draft that had some type of connection with Cincinnati. We just talked to one of the other guys, Erick All, who's from Fairfield, Ohio. And then Manning, another AFC North guy. He's like a huge 6'4", 340-pound guard who has a lot of fun tape of just mauling the crap out of guys. So experiencing, the toughest division in football. So full 16-player practice squad, and I really think that they made some quality additions, particularly in the trenches there.
I agree with you. I liked what I saw on that front, and I'm not going to rehash it. I mean, the division DNA, so to speak, and coming from other talented teams and talented groups on those teams, makes a lot of sense. So at any rate, I think the Bengals are in pretty good shape going forward. I wish the injuries didn't hit them where they did, and there's been a slew of them because we're also, we didn't really talk about them, but Cam Sample IR. So that defensive line has still been hit pretty hard with injuries, and the Bengals have tried to do some things to remedy that, but it may be a little bit more higher scoring early in the season until some of these guys get back. Maybe not. You still have your star players, Hubbard and Hendrickson and others. And if your secondary steps up the way that it should, and it really, the bar was kind of low based on last year in some of the performance metrics. So, if they step up from there, you're looking at to be in pretty good shape. But exciting times, and the Bengals have a tough game, but a winnable game coming up against the New England Patriots. And we'll be previewing that coming up. Hopefully get a fun guest to help do that for us. But that is what's ahead. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. We had Erick All on for the first, third of the show, if not a little more. And then we talked a little Jamar Chase and roster construction. We'll be back next week with a lot of different stuff, not only on this show, but on the other shows in the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. Let's drop the mic and get out of here, John. We're coming up on an hour, and this has been a hell of a fun show, man. And mostly because of you, of course, you're a fun guy. You always make it fun. I make it boring, but you and our special guest, of course, made it fun. But what do you got for us on our way out?
I was going to ask about Erick All's time playing in the GMC in high school, because Lakota West, my alma mater, and Fairfield are pretty big rivals there in that conference. And I couldn't bring myself to do it because he's just such a nice kid. And it's I didn't want to bring up that potentially tough question, because I know Wes has been really good in the GMC lately, so maybe he doesn't have the best memories of playing that team. But no, really, really awesome kid, and I can tell why the Bengals were really smitten with him in the pre-draft process. And someone that I immediately, as soon as they drafted him, like, oh, this is definitely one of the better tight ends that they've drafted in quite some time. And just seeing him be healthy, contributing, making a positive impact, it's been awesome to see that progression since April, when everything's been around. Can he stay healthy? Can he get back in time to actually play the season? So far, so really good. So really good to talk to him.
Yeah, hard to make, deviate off of that, but you are right. And nice guy. Wish the best for him. That story, if you haven't heard about it, you can go on YouTube and see. I think College Game Day and some other news outlets kind of covered the story, but pretty scary stuff. And obviously he counts his blessings. And, that's one of those stories, especially as a team goes far and as a guy has individual success, that gets looked back at a bit. Maybe he gets sick of talking about it a little bit, but I'm sure every once in a while he thinks about it and says, man, look at how far I've come despite, this and, the injury stuff. I think we all liked the pick in a lot of respects. It was more like, okay, like you said, how healthy is he? How healthy is he going to be? And what can he do right away? And I think he has pleasantly surprised us all in terms of his rehab ability to come back and ability to seemingly contribute right away. Zach Taylor complimented him. So at any rate, we are going to get out of here. He is John. I am Anthony. He was Erick All on the show earlier, and we'll be coming at you with more stuff. John, have a great rest of your week, my friend, and we'll be back soon.
Talk to you guys soon.